We are joined by a special guest today. We have Terrell Jermaine Starr here. He's a senior reporter with The Root. And you, Terrell, good morning. Good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon on the East Coast, huh?
It is.
And so you've been covering the 2020 elections. You've had a couple big interviews that got a lot of attention. Your Kamala Harris interview got a ton of attention. I was actually waiting for it because kind of like the tease up to it. I want to just like jump right into some things that you've been talking about, some answers you've been getting from candidates. And why don't we start with reparations? Because I remember, I think it was a tweet, and you've said that Julián Castro is the most devoted to the true definition of reparations. Can you explain that and maybe possibly where other candidates are getting it wrong?
Absolutely, and I should correct that. Actually, Marianne Williamson, who is also a candidate for president, she's actually even closer. And I think with Julián Castro, I guess more of the mainstream person who people feel has a closer shot. In that case, it would be Julián. And what I mean by that is many of the candidates have been pretty skittish early on about the conversation, but it's been activists that's been pushing it, pushing the discourse on it. Basically, specifically creating policy that aims to target Black people, right? And so it's not something in which we want reparations for Black people to end racism. It's more about paying a financial amount of money to Black people across the state for the travails of slavery. Now, we asked Kamala Harris about this, and she said that she was for it. Then she spoke to The Root and said, well, I'm not trying to do anything necessarily for Black people. So she gave a very different answer to the Rio than she did to us. And I think with Cory Booker, he talked about baby bonds. And so you have a lot of people who seem to be afraid to take that on, but then you have Julián, who people consider to be a third or maybe second tier candidate. And what I'm looking for during this campaign season, as I talk to him and others, is if he's able to take economic justice and be more forward with it, he's probably going to have a greater shot than many people anticipate on Super Tuesday and the rest of the and the rest of the campaign. He could potentially be a sleeper if he keeps up being more specific about reparations and also other things that impact Black people directly, particularly with the wealth gap.
Terrell, this is JR. So when on the talk of like reparations, we've had all these, with the field growing so much for the presidential, for the Democratic side for the president. When they have to talk about reparations, there's always a concern that they're not coming off correct to the right voting bloc or coming off badly with another voting bloc. So they're trying to be very careful, which I think is why
they don't want to offend white people. Let's just say it, bro.
Yeah. So okay. So that's right. But they also don't want to lose the Black vote either, right? So do you think because of the identity of many of these candidates that they're looking to find where their niche is? Like, does Castro have an advantage because he's not the Black candidate or one of the Black candidates are seen as that? So is it easier to fit in, or maybe even as a Black candidate, it's easier to have your message said a certain way?
You know, that's actually a good question. During this particular cycle, I don't think any of that matters because you have the most diverse pool of candidates in presidential, Democratic primary history. And so you have to remember that the activist movement is really what's pushing this discourse. And so in 2016, this conversation would have taken place because candidates don't feel forced and compelled to do it. But actually go to 2018 where you have Stacey Abrams, you have Andrew Gillum, you have the AOCs, you have the Ayanna Presleys of the world who are coming out being bold and Black and proud of it and winning on that and leaning into that. And so there is a way in which Black women in particular have been moving this conversation. And so you basically can't be a scared candidate anymore. This campaign cycle is not going to go for it, and particularly Black voters. And you have to really speak specifically to Black voters because people are paying attention to Iowa, they're paying attention to New Hampshire, but if you don't win Super Tuesday and you don't get the majority of the Black vote or a strong percentage of it, you're not gonna win, particularly Black women. And so if you know that, and Julián Castro does, and we know that based on his hiring of a Black woman to be his campaign manager, someone who has legitimate power. So it's not going to matter what your race is. What's going to matter is if you sound real or not, because we had Stacey Abrams, we had Andrew Gillum, people who we all felt that had they won their respective gubernatorial races, that they would be in the line for president, and they came out being authentically Black in themselves and being bold and being progressively Black. And so nobody's going to be able to get away with that. And if you're a candidate that's scared to talk about reparations, that's going to be a major mark on you.
Interesting. All right, Terrell, let's talk about Trump's use of ICE with Black immigrants, because I think sometimes we do have kind of like this narrow view of who is impacted by unfair immigration policies. And in kind of thinking about this and this question, I was reminded of 21 Savage and his detainment. It was last month, I think, by ICE, and they called it a targeted operation. And outside of the PR tour immigration officials kind of went on regarding his arrest, it is a story that is pretty common with many Black immigrants. And it's just not something that I think we think about or are talking about as often. And I know you're working on something about this. And I was wondering, do you think things are worse under Trump?
Oh, far worse, right? So the thing is that, the way that ICE is operated, even under former President Barack Obama, none of these administrations have been particularly kind to immigrants through ICE. So, but what makes the difference with Trump is that he's so openly racist and so openly direct and forward about targeting countries in which they're basically people of color, namely Eritrea, Guinea, Sierra Leone, recently Ghana, for example, right? You also have Cambodia, and in 2017, the Trump administration ordered visa restrictions against the countries I just named, and the excuse is that they were not adequately processing applications for deportation of their nationals from the United States to their respective countries. Now, if you speak to those respective countries that I named, Ghana, for example, they will tell you that, well, the U.S. has not given us the proper paperwork to prove that the people that they want to send to us are in fact our nationals. Now, the Advancement Project in Washington, D.C. recently filed a lawsuit against ICE, against the Department of State, Department of Homeland Security, and among other departments, because they want specific information behind why individual people are being detained by ICE and being ordered to be deported. And so you have situations in which these deportation notices have been signed, but we don't know what type of crime the people may have broken or violated or not. And so it's just very arbitrary. And so the work that I'm going to be doing over the next few weeks will be discussing this lawsuit by the Advancement Project in Washington, D.C., but also exploring how these bans are impacting people who can't get visas to come to work, for example, over the United States. Also, people who are detained by ICE who don't necessarily have the right to representation during hearings or right to translators, et cetera. And so those are some of the things I'm doing, but it's a very arbitrary approach that this administration is taking place. And is it far worse? Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. Terrell, thank you so much for joining us today. Terrell Jermaine Starr, senior reporter with The Root. Looking out for your next piece. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching this clip from The Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.